Jimmy Dore, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Great to be here. Congratulations on your 200th episode.
Absolutely, and it's an honor to have you on this show for the 200th episode. You are a huge inspiration for me and a lot of folks like me, I know. And actually, a funny little tidbit is that the first theme song that I used for this show is your theme song, and I didn't know it at the time. I wasn't aware of your show at the time, but that backbeat that you have, that was actually the first thing that Primo Nutmeg listeners ever heard on this podcast. So
no kidding.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. All right.
But as I mentioned, you're a huge inspiration to me, and you've really opened my eyes to this neo-McCarthyism that we're under today. And I think that this is a great time to have you on the show as well, because we really saw this exposed the last couple of weeks with Hillary Clinton and going after Tulsi Gabbard as well as Jill Stein.
I'm not making any predictions, but I think they've got their eye on somebody who's currently in the Democratic primary and are grooming her to be the third-party candidate. She's the favorite of the Russians. They have a bunch of, sites and bots and other ways of supporting her so far. And that's assuming Jill Stein will give it up, which she might not, because she's also a Russian asset.
It seems to me as though Hillary kind of jumped the RussiaGate shark. I saw a lot of people in the mainstream kind of going after her a bit. I mean, even Beto O'Rourke was standing up for Tulsi. And on Meet the Press, somebody had mentioned that it was a conspiracy theory, and Chuck Todd actually seemed to agree with that. So it seems like she may have gone a little bit too far. Is that what you read, or do you think that people have largely been accommodating of her conspiracy theory?
So she has her minions in the press that still go along with the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation, whatever they want them to say, they say. But there's also there are some people who apparently aren't in the Clinton, in the minions of the Clinton, and they are actually telling the truth. So that was kind of weird to see. It was weird to see Chuck Todd call what Hillary Clinton said a conspiracy theory, as if what Chuck Todd has been saying for the last 3 years isn't a conspiracy theory.
Right,
so
exactly.
It's a conspiracy theory. It's nice to see, at least they say it's true that Hillary Clinton's when they say, first of all, it's so weird how they perverted the term conspiracy, right? People get charged with conspiracy in court every day of the week, right? So those are real things. Conspiracies are real. In fact, what RussiaGate was a conspiracy theory that Trump colluded with Putin, the Russians, and WikiLeaks to rig the election. That's a conspiracy theory. But you notice they've so tarnished that word and made it so toxic that they couldn't call what they were doing a conspiracy theory, so they called it collusion. And no one ever picked up on that except I think us at our show. Was that why? I've never heard anyone use the term collusion before. Why are they saying collusion, collusion, collusion? Oh, the reason why is because they've so tarnished the word conspiracy that they can't be seen themselves as being pushing a conspiracy theory, which is exactly what they were doing. So it's weird how an actual thing, which is a people commit conspiracies all the time. All a conspiracy is two people conspiring to commit a crime. That's a conspiracy. But they've so made that term toxic, conspiracy theory, to discredit anybody who questions them, that they can't use it when they're doing it. So they use the term collusion. Am I being clear? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so thank God that Hillary is such a psychopath that what Tom Brokaw referred to as overreached. I referred to it as lying about Tulsi Gabbard. She did it in such a spectacularly over the top and transparently bullshit way that people started to call her out for it in the press, which is wild, right? Because the press has a herd mentality, and that's how RussiaGate happens. That's how we go into the Iraq war. That's how Syria happens. That's how Libya happens. That's how Venezuela almost happened. Is because the press has a herd mentality. There are not a lot of original thinkers in the press. They get weeded out. If you're an original thinker, you get weeded out. If you're not an original thinker, you get promoted to be a host on CNN or a op-ed columnist for the New York Times or the Washington Post. But if you actually have original thoughts, you get weeded out.
So, yeah, and this has continued on a little bit where this past, actually even just today, I believe it was, Juan Williams put out a new piece in The Hill. I don't know if you've seen this yet.
No.
He went after Tulsi. He was making the same sort of allusions to her being propped up by Russia, and also
Juan Williams,
yes,
the
and he.
the guy who's been propping up Fox News for the last decade.
Well, he also said that it's, he was making allusions to the right wing and saying, essentially, if you support peace, I guess you're a right winger. He put out a tweet where he summarized it. He said, inside the conservative bubble of fantasy politics, the game extends to generating fake social media support for fringe candidates for the Democratic nomination, including Marianne Williamson, Andrew Yang, and most of all, Representative Tulsi Gabbard. So it's just nuts.
So again, you can just spew, and he will pay no price for that, because what he's doing is propaganda, which another word for that is lying, at behest of who? The establishment. And so no one will ever hold him account to that. Just like Hillary won't be held account for spewing the most ridiculous. What she did was worse than Alex Jones ever did was what Hillary Clinton did, and she'll never be held accountable. Which is hilarious to see. They always need to have a whipping boy. They have to have a bad guy, and meanwhile they're just as horrible as Alex Jones. And that's why we're in 7 wars and nobody gives a shit about it. That's why 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck and it never shows up on the news. That's why 50% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency, and that never shows up on the news. 30 million Americans don't have health care. That almost never gets talked about on the news. It never even makes it into the healthcare debate. So, the problem is, again, corporate news is horrible, and they're going to keep writing this out until the country devolves.
Well, one thing on there being no consequences, I actually just interviewed Jill Stein yesterday for the 199th episode, and I asked her, are you considering any kind of legal action against Hillary Clinton or anybody in the mainstream media who's accused you of being a Russian asset? And she said, yes, she is considering that. So I did want to bring it back to the Hillary Clinton thing, because I did have a question about that, because, she said you are a Russian asset, pretty clearly. You've also had these smears against you from various, public figures in the corporate media and politicians. Have you ever considered any kind of legal action or lawsuit against any of these people? Mm-hmm. Are you going to be pursuing?
We'll see. Yeah. I'm sort of exploring whether that's possible or not. Because it's not a small thing, It's
Sure.
not a small thing to have to turn your life around to fight these smears.
Right.
But to my mind, it's not just the smears we're fighting. We're really fighting a democracy that's been hijacked. And it's very important to break that stranglehold right now. So, to my mind, it's a battle worth fighting, and I'm fighting for much more than myself. But if I had my druthers, there are other ways I would rather be fighting that battle. So we'll see. So
I really hope she does pursue that. I don't know, what the president might be for doing something like that, but, being accused, being slandered and libeled as a Russian asset, that's not really a small thing, especially when, these powerful media corporations and the former Secretary of State are doing it.
Let me ask you, how do you feel? Like, now you're getting into the news broadcasting business, and thank God for the this third industrial revolution we're in right now, where information is digitized. So now you and I can also have a platform and compete with people in the mainstream establishment news business. We can compete directly. I compete directly with them and beat them. How do you feel about journalism, especially journalism on the left, which is what I always thought was good journalism? And it turns out they are, given the circumstance, any journalist on the left can turn into Glenn Beck, given the circumstance. So how does that make you feel?
Well, I know that, personally, I think that there's been some pushback against shows like ours, and that you've spoken about, social media censorship. And my show was demonetized for most of last year, and I still have, a lot of episodes as they come out, especially if they deal with RussiaGate or, controversial issues, they'll be demonetized. So there just seems to be a lot of institutional pushback against any kind of voices like ours, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I saw a guy who's a very, very prominent left-wing broadcaster just the other day, 2 or 3 days, maybe 2 days ago. A caller called in and was giving him the information about Bill Binney and telling him that, about there's lots of questions about if Russia actually hacked into the DNC server, especially since the DNC didn't allow the FBI to investigate their server. They had CrowdStrike, which CrowdStrike has been revealed to first they were working for the Clinton campaign. You can't have somebody do an investigation who's working on your payroll. B, CrowdStrike has been proven to be lying about Russia before and since. So they've actually been debunked and caught lying. And so I saw a prominent host just like take it as they got as Bible that's if CrowdStrike said it, apparently that's good to do an investigation. You have an outside party provide the information to the FBI. That happens nowhere else in any other investigation. That happens nowhere. So it's just so, I mean, I see that on the regular, and that's why I got, and then he dismissed the person who brought up this idea about, hey, we don't really have evidence that Russia hacked the DNC server because of what I just mentioned. And he dismissed that person as a right-wing crank.
Wow, that's insane.
That's like, no, there's someone who had Bill Binney, the top code breaker at the NSA. The FBI tried to frame him and put him in jail. He's so smart, he outwitted the FBI. The guy who debunked WMDs in real time when the rest of the media got it completely wrong. That guy's a right-wing crank. So
it's all a conspiracy theory, Jimmy.
That exactly right. So that's what's happening. And I was watching that show Rising with Crystal Ball and the Cigar and Jetty. I think that's how you say his name. And they had a Democratic congressman on, and they were talking about Hunter Biden's corruption in the Ukraine. And his response was, that's a conspiracy theory being pushed by the president. And they stopped him in real time, which they would never do on any other news show. They stopped him and said, it's not a conspiracy theory that Hunter Biden got a $50,000 a month no-show job on an energy board when he didn't know anything about energy or Ukraine. That's not but that's just what their go-to is now. That's a conspiracy theory. So when a caller calls into a left-wing show and says, hey, there's lots of doubts about whether the DNC server was actually hacked, and you dismiss it as a conspiracy theory, now you sound just as dumb as Sean Hannity ever could be, or Alex Jones ever could be, and it's just in reverse. So everything they say about RussiaGate is fact, even though it's not. It's completely made up by the intelligence community. It's a hoax. Remember when they were saying 17 agencies signed off on the fact? You remember that? That was just made up, and they all repeated it. And then when that got debunked, nobody did a mea culpa. Oh, by the way, all that shit we were reporting uncritically that came from the government, we were wrong. And we were wrong to not be skeptical. They're not even skeptical of the government anymore. They're not even skeptical of the CIA or the FBI. Why? Because what the CIA and FBI is saying lines up with their preconceived political positions. So they don't question it. That's not journalism. That's propaganda. And that's happening ubiquitously, which is why I have a show that's popular, because when people call into shows like that with actual information from actual experts, they dismiss it because it doesn't line up with their already preconceived political views. That's what a hack does. That's what a propagandist does. That's what state media does. So Chomsky already laid this out for us, that any dictator would be happy with it. Americans. State media doesn't run as well as the corporate media in the United States runs for the establishment. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's amazing to watch. You see it. You watch my show, so you see it. So you'll never get the truth about Syria on establishment TV. You'll never get the truth about Venezuela or Libya or Iran or any of that stuff, or RussiaGate on corporate TV. It's just not going to happen. And when we actually give you the truth on shows like this, establishment places wag their finger at us and say, oh, you're pushing some kind of no, that's what they're pushing. We debunk those motherfuckers, and they can't take it. Corporate news is allergic to the truth, just like the military industrial complex is, and just the Democratic Party. So they're all allergic to the truth. And it's amazing. Like Chris Hayes the other day told the truth about NBC News covering up the Harvey Weinstein investigation that was done by Ronan Farrow. And you would think the earth quaked. Oh my God, Chris Hayes told the truth for 3 minutes on his show the other day, and we're all supposed to send him a fucking congratulations card.
Well, the worst part of this, because I think that we could predict that the corporate media was going to do this, right? Because they pushed the WMD lies and, they're part of the military industrial complex. What I think the real shame is when you see these actual left-wing media outlets pushing RussiaGate. And we saw this recently with Democracy Now! They had Robert McNamee on there. He is a Silicon Valley investor, and he was talking about how he had warned Facebook about Russian interference. And I know that Aaron Mateus talked about this a little bit, just the trend of Democracy Now! Kind of pushing RussiaGate is really astounding, especially when you consider how many times Amy Goodman has interviewed Noam Chomsky. You'd think she might be a little more skeptical to this, but it's just not happening, seemingly.
She had Noam, I'll say this, it's like a schizophrenic show now. So she'll bring on people like Glenn Greenwald and Noam Chomsky that completely debunk this bullshit RussiaGate with logic, and facts. And then people like Chomsky say, I'll give it to you. Let's even say Russia is doing what they said. The people who are influencing our election is not Russia, it's Israel. And we all know that. And it's corporate America. Those are the people that influence our elections. It's got nothing to do with Russia. Even Nate Silver admitted in a moment of candor, which is rare for a guy who works for Disney. In a moment of candor, Nate Silver tweeted out, among the things that influenced the 2016 election, I would think that Russia wouldn't even crack the top 100. So they all know this in their, either they know it subconsciously or consciously, and they just repress it. So they all know this is bullshit. So you're telling me Trump is such a evil? He's an idiot moron who lies every second and doesn't know what he's doing. He's such an idiot. And he's also smart enough to outwit the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, and Robert Mueller for 3 straight years as he's committing treason. Those two things don't go together.
Yeah, it's really self-serving. It seems like, it's just the ends justify the means, and it doesn't really need to make sense to a certain degree. But I did want to ask you about something in particular, because you, of course, were with the Young Turks for a long time. You're part of their network. And to some degree, I think that they have also pushed RussiaGate a little bit. And in other ways, well, yeah, a bit. So, and also I know Emma has been really outspoken against Tulsi Gabbard. So, I mean, it just seems like there's also, this sort of MSNBC influence happening in the Young Turks. And I just thought, I thought I'd ask you if you had any kind of take on that, or just any kind of insight you might be able to provide.
All I can tell you is that when I started doing this show called Aggressive Progressives, because the main show took a editorial turn, right? So it was after the primer, after they decided Bernie wasn't viable anymore, they went full speed, 100% Hillary, and they had a segment called Loser Donald. So they would bash Donald Trump, and it just so that was the impetus for Steve O and I, who was the COO of the company, to start a show called Aggressive Progressives as kind of a counter narrative to the way the editorial direction of the main show. And I thought it would be good. We'd be complimentary, right? So we would point out, everybody has blind spots or whatever. Here's what we think. Here's what they. And I thought it would be a good thing. And then I thought that our reporting would, would expose things, and people would see it and go, "Oh, I didn't know this," and it would change how they did what they were doing. That didn't happen. It turns out that, my effort to shine a light on contrary narratives of RussiaGate was not, it was, it just created not a good environment. It wasn't welcomed. And I get that. I understand. And so that's all I can say, is that I was hoping that my reporting. So do you know anyone else who won an award doing their reporting on RussiaGate? I don't. I don't know anybody besides Aaron Mate, and we had Aaron Mate on our show constantly, and we would bring him on. I bring him on Aggressive Progressives when I was in the Young Turks studio. I bring him on this show, and we would debunk all the bullshit of RussiaGate, and it wasn't hard to do. And so I just it's weird. We got it right, 100% right.
And I think you've been
got it right, 100% right, and I thought that would be more appreciated. That's all I was looking for, and it wasn't. So that's all I can tell you now. The way their editorial direction. I mean, I can't speak to that. I don't know why. I can't tell you why they've taken the editorial direction they've taken or why they do what they do. That's up to. I mean, you watch it and make your own decisions. But I was real proud of the work we did at Aggressive Progressives. We debunked RussiaGate on a weekly basis. We debunked the poor Venezuela coverage. We debunked the gas attacks in Syria. We were way ahead of everybody on all this stuff. And I did a lot of it in the TYT newsroom on Aggressive Progressives. And again, Aaron Mate won an award for that kind of reporting. Of course, they can't give an award to a jagoff comedian who says fuck every other sentence. So they gave it to Aaron Mate because he had the imprimatur of The Nation magazine. But again, like I said, Aaron Mate is such a generous guy and such a solid dude that he said he shares that award with our show. So
awesome.
I'm going to accept it. How about that? I'm going to go ahead and accept that. So here we were doing award-winning journalism on stuff like Venezuela, stuff like RussiaGate, and stuff like Julian Assange, and debunking everybody in the mainstream news media. And so I'm really proud of the work we did there. And it was disheartening to me. I thought that if I kept doing good work and I kept showing, the debunking of RussiaGate, that eventually everybody would catch on. That didn't happen. It was heartbreaking for me. And that's all I can tell you.
I think that Bernie Sanders, to some degree, has sort of given cover to this because he's also adopted this RussiaGate language. There's been a clip that I've shown many times in this show now of him quoting John McCain while calling for sanctions against Russia. And even to some degree, you've seen that with Venezuela and him supporting militarized aid. But if Bernie Sanders was somehow able to magically win the nomination this time, how big of a drawback is his foreign policy overall, and specifically RussiaGate? Is it something that, is disqualifying, or would you still support him regardless?
No, it's not disqualifying. Bernie is excellent on domestic policies. His foreign policy has always been squiggly. Or squishy. I don't know whichever term you want to use, but it's never been consistent, and he often repeats CIA talking points, which is a mistake. Why is that a mistake? Because the CIA needs to convince you of the reason why they need to invade another country. And if you buy into the pretext, now you're immoral. But usually the pretext is we have to help people who are being oppressed and murdered by a dictator. That's usually the pretext. So now if you say, I agree that's happening, but I don't want to help them, now you look like you're immoral, that you don't want to help people. So if you accept the CIA framing of these regime change wars, then you already lost. And that's what Bernie does all the time. Why? He has bad advisors. Bernie had bad advisors in 2016. And he got bad advisors this time. What's attractive about Bernie is Bernie and Bernie's positions, right? And so that's why I support Tulsi over Bernie in the primary, because Tulsi's got a much clearer foreign policy. I think it's fantastic. I think that if we can break the military-industrial complex's narrative on our foreign wars right now and start talking about all the money we're spending on the military, which is what she does. She says we're spending $4 billion a month in Afghanistan, and we still have dirty water in Flint. No one else is doing that. So The fact and you see how allergic the military-industrial complex is to the truth. Tulsi Gabbard, someone polling at 2 or 3%, says that in public, and they immediately got to try to squash her.
Well, that's something else I wanted to ask you, is because they're spending so much time and energy against her. Do you think that these polls are accurate? Because why would you exert so much time and energy against a candidate who you're saying doesn't have a chance?
I think those polls are probably accurate. I mean, there's lots of polls that the DNC doesn't use, and they're pretty consistent. I mean, I think the highest Tulsi has ever polled was maybe 5 or 6%. So I think they're probably right or near right. I think the reason that she gets such pushback and so many smears from the establishment media is because she's pushing back against the establishment's narrative. And the establishment's narrative is we need to keep bombing 7 different Muslim countries right now. We got to keep doing that. And as soon as Trump says we got to take soldiers out, they're like, he's crazy. What is he doing? He's wrong. You can't take soldiers out. So every time he announces taking soldiers out of Syria, there would immediately be a gas attack. Isn't that amazing? And then now we've learned, of course, that those gas attacks were all bogus. Those were, again, being committed by terrorists. And who are the terrorists? Al-Qaeda, ISIS, now being called al-Nusra. And who's supporting them? Saudi Arabia and the CIA. Look up a thing called Timber Sycamore. Just look that up. Google Timber Sycamore. It'll tell you exactly what it is. The CIA is supporting terrorists to overthrow Assad. Why do we want to overthrow Syria? Why? No one ever talked. Well, because he's a butcher. So fucking what? We're committing a genocide in Yemen. So it can't be because he's a butcher. Why are we in Syria? Because Saudi Arabia and Qatar wants to put a natural gas line right through Syria to sell it to Europe. That's what's happening. And the news will never tell you that.
So I can tell that Hillary Clinton doesn't watch my show because she got several things wrong that I have covered and talked with people about. When she said that Tulsi Gabbard is going to run as a third party, Tulsi has said on my show and many other places that she's not going to run as a third party candidate, even though many of us probably think she should. She said Jill Stein, if she gives it up. Jill Stein has said many, many times, including on this show, that she's not running for the Green Party nomination this year. And in fact, the ironic thing is the person running and the front runner for the Green Party nomination this year is Howie Hawkins, who on this show supported the RussiaGate narrative to a certain degree.
So, the media is, they're following this RussiaGate thing, which I think is serious. I think Trump ought to be impeached. I think it's obvious he saw collusion. He did collude, him and his son and his son-in-law. And, it's all over that first volume of the Mueller report. It's all over there. I mean, when people say, oh, it showed no collusion. No, it didn't. It says, Mueller says right away, I didn't talk about collusion. I talk about narrow legal definition of conspiracy. Plus, I can't indict a president, according to this OLC letter in the Justice Department. He just laid out the evidence for prosecutors, which has to be Congress.
So Howie Hawkins pushing RussiaGate as a Green Party person, the guy is intellectually impaired. I don't know what his emotional development is, but when he does something like that, that's a guy not to be trusted. You can't trust Howie Hawkins as far as you can throw him. That's why that guy, is he a mole inside the Green Party? Probably. The Green Party needs to get rid of guys like Howie Hawkins who push RussiaGate. And if they embrace him, then, that's the end of the Green Party for sure. Jill Stein was on my show and she talked about, she also castigated, it's a nice term, nice way to say that, castigated Howie Hawkins for doing that. And Howie Hawkins revealed himself to be, deficient and not up to the task of leading anybody anywhere to do anything. What he did was cowardly and stupid and destructive, and he's toxic. And if he's the Green Party nominee, to good luck.
Can you just explain what the history is between you two? Because I know that you did endorse him for governor. I know he interviewed you at one point, but then I guess
he was doing Randy Credico, who has a show on WBII in New York, was doing a fundraiser for Howie Hawkins in New York, and I Skyped in. To help support the Green Party candidate who was running against Andrew Cuomo. So I didn't know much about Howie Hawkins. I knew he was a Green Party candidate, and I knew I certainly wasn't going to endorse Andrew Cuomo. And I'm all for third parties. I'm all for, we need to have a third party polling above 5%. So we now have leverage over the Democratic Party. What do you mean leverage? So leverage is when Hillary wins the nomination, she doesn't then appoint or pick a progressive as her vice president. She puts a conservative, somebody to the right of her. So if there was the third party that were progressives, she would have to then kind of form a coalition. Otherwise, you're not going to win an election. If the lefty party is polling at 5, 6, 7%, you're not going to win a general election because you'll lose, right? So at that point you can't stick your thumb in the eye of the third party anymore. You have to actually reach out to them. Instead of what the Democrats do now is call them Russians and smear them and try to demolish them, so they never have to move to the left. And so that's why I'm all for a third party that's polls at 5%, so they get matching funds from the government, and they can be really viable. They can get in debates, and they can move the Democratic Party back to being the Democratic Party. So that's why I reflexively endorsed a guy like Howie Hawkins and was willing to do a fundraiser for him. And then I found out he's a RussiaGator, and he pushed lies about Syria. He pushed CIA talking points about Syria. He pushes CIA talking points about RussiaGate. He pushes CIA so that's a guy who's reckless, and he's dangerous. He's toxic. He's not fit to lead anybody. And the Green Party had any sense, they get rid of that guy, because he's the death of the Green Party for sure.
Yeah, as I understand it, there's several influential people in the Green Party who are pushing for him. And actually, that's part of the issue, too, in their presidential nomination process, is some of the presidential candidates are saying that co-chairs are, working with him. And I guess a former co-chair is his campaign manager, and another co-chair was the person who launched the Howie Hawkins for President campaign. So, yeah, it seems like a really messy situation. I actually had Jesse Ventura on my show recently, too. And he suggested that he might be thinking about running for the Green Party nomination. He actually said, well, how do you feel about me running with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as a running mate? So will you ever run for president? Will you seek the Green Party nomination?
I don't know. You'll find out in the spring. Okay. Why would I do it now? Wait till the Pikers are gone.
Okay. Well,
Come
Governor,
on, it's all about tactics, man. It's tactics. That's how you win. It ain't time now. It's too early.
I sincerely hope that you do run for president this year, and I think it would be awesome if you did.
Well, let me just leave you with this. What do you think about a ticket? Imagine this ticket. Governor Jesse Ventura and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
That sounds great. I would love to see that.
He quits the Democratic Party and joins me with the Greens.
But I also get the sense that Jesse, he likes to kind of talk about these things. I don't know. I don't know if he's really going to do it or not, but what would you think if Jesse Ventura did jump in for the Green Party nomination?
I think it would be, I love Jesse Ventura. I think his voice, again, we need more voices in politics, not less. And I think he brings a real clear perspective and tells a lot of truths the establishment certainly doesn't want to hear. That's why Jesse's always been popular with regular people. Yeah, I love Jesse Ventura, and if he does it, it's a much needed voice.
Well, so what I wanted to work up to here is, with obviously the corporate media, but also, with Democracy Now!, the Young Turks, Bernie Sanders, and even the Green Party now seemingly nominating a RussiaGator, just having all of these voices on the left giving cover to RussiaGate. I mean, what's really left? Is it just me, you, and, a handful of podcasters? I mean, what hope is there to really fight back against this when there's so many institutional powers, both in centrist politics and left-wing politics, that are pushing RussiaGate?
I wish I had an answer for you, buddy. I don't know. I thought, and the reason why I stuck it out so long at TYT was I thought that the Mueller report, I knew what was going to be in it when it came out because I was covering it. So I predicted what would be in it and what wouldn't be in it. And we were 100% right. I thought when the Mueller report came out that would be the end of it. And that's where I was really mistaken. And that it just kept going. So Hillary Clinton being such a psychopath that she She red baits a sitting congressperson who is currently serving in the illegal wars that she championed and engineered. Her doing that kind of crazy overreach is the beginning of the end of RussiaGate. It's not the middle. It's not the end. It's maybe just the beginning. So hopefully she'll do that to a few other people. And, it's never going to have the mainstream news media is never, there's a Pulitzer Prize winning story out there to be written. And the story is the debunking of RussiaGate. And it appeared Aaron Mate's written it, Matt Taibbi's written it. We've done it here at this show. That the Pulitzer is never going to acknowledge us, but it will acknowledge somebody who writes it in the New York Times or the Washington Post or Time Magazine or something like that. And just all it takes is for a writer and an editor to have the balls to go against the establishment and the herd mentality and tell the truth, and they will win a Pulitzer Prize. They will not do that. And that's why I have so almost zero respect for what we consider the profession of journalism. They're all go along. The good ones get weeded out. I love journalists, not the ones who work for mainstream news. The ones who work for mainstream news are pretty much, on the whole, they've been selected to keep propping up the establishment. Just look again. So, and that's how you have something like WMDs. That's how you have something like the economic meltdown happen, and then Barack Obama makes the banks bigger. Nobody ever talks about it. That's how you have RussiaGate. That's how you have us bombing 7 different countries, because journalism is just PR. God damn it. Chomsky wrote a book about it. Him and Edward Herman wrote a book called Manufacturing Consent. And you turn on the TV news or you read the New York Times, and it's obvious that if any of these journalists read that book, they suppress it.
Well, they probably would get out of the industry. Jimmy, I really appreciate you being on the show. If you just have a few more minutes, I'm starting this new thing now where my patrons can submit questions to the guests. So I just had a few questions here from patrons, if that's all right.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay. First question is, would you vote for a neoliberal Democrat ticket with Bernie or Tulsi as vice president? Or in that situation, would you vote for a third party if there was a green or independent convincing anti-war ticket?
Can you ask me that again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a little complicated. Sorry. He's asking. So here's a scenario: either Bernie or Tulsi is vice president, but the nominee, I guess, is Biden or somebody like that, a neoliberal. But there is a third party candidate who is convincingly anti-war. Would you vote for that third party candidate, or would you vote for the neoliberal with Bernie or Tulsi?
No, third party. Tulsi if Tulsi's the vice president to Bernie, that might be good. If Tulsi's the vice president to Joe Biden, the vice president doesn't have any power. And so it would be good because her and Bernie, she could maybe nudge him on foreign policy. They're already pretty close. She could nudge him, but Joe Biden is a full-blown right-wing, imperialist, and so she would just have to go to her office in the basement where the vice president usually goes. And how much influence did Joe Biden have in the fucking White House? None.
Right, it's true. Just somebody else had asked about the Jesse Ventura. He said, what do you think about the dynamics of the Jesse Ventura and Howie Hawkins in the Green Party? But I think we've already covered that.
I think we just covered that, yeah.
So the only last question I had here is, in your own circle of friends and family, have you also interacted with someone from a more mainstream political leaning, like reading the New York Times? Were you able to provide them enough information to reconsider their position, or did they simply dismiss them as right-wing talking points? I tried it with Aaron Mate to counter the Russia smear with Tulsi, and my friend said he was naive. Said Aaron Mate.
So I guess just tell your friend that he's an award-winning journalist about RussiaGate. But again, if facts mattered, so RussiaGate is not based on facts. RussiaGate is based on emotions and hating Donald Trump. It's a religion. And what is a religion? A religion is something that doesn't need proof or evidence. It needs faith. And so when you provide proof to someone that is believing in a religion, That doesn't work, right? Hey, there is an invisible man in the sky. That doesn't matter to religious people. So trying to convince somebody about that RussiaGate is a hoax, it doesn't work, because the propaganda doesn't use facts; they use emotion. And that's from the beginning, from the Creel Commission. I mean, they figured that out. Hitler figured that out, and now modern day propagandists and PR people, they know that. They know that people vote on emotion; they don't vote on facts. And so the people who believe in RussiaGate believe in it as a religion. They believe it on faith. There's no facts, which means they haven't been reasoned in. There's an old saying: you can't reason someone out of something that they haven't been reasoned into. And so that RussiaGate is not a reasonable response to Donald Trump being president. It is an irrational response, and it's just an emotional hatred. And so, derangement syndromes are real, and the Trump derangement syndrome is real.
Well, Jimmy, I really do appreciate you being out there, being a voice of reason. Again, you've really been an inspiration to me and helped open my eyes. And I know there's many other people out there who you've inspired. So thank you for all of the work that you've done. I don't know if maybe you have any kind of teasers for upcoming shows that you might be able to share, or just let people know how they can follow you and stay up to date with your show and also your touring as well.
And can I just say that the reason why it's important to debunk RussiaGate and why it's so insidious and unbelievably destructive that people on the left push it, it's because the intelligence community, the military-industrial complex, and the establishment has always used red baiting smears to silence people on the left, right? That's how they got rid of all the lefties and unions after World War II. They all say, they're all lefties and they're all communists, so we could get rid of them. We can really say they're communists, so we can get rid of them. And when the left pushes RussiaGate and they prop it up instead of debunking it and discrediting it, it will. I said this at the beginning. They're doing this to Trump now, but that always is used against the left. And it was immediately used against the left on Facebook. 800 lefty Facebook pages were taken down under the guise of fighting RussiaGate. And now they're using RussiaGate to silence, discredit, and smear a sitting congresswoman who's currently serving in these illegal wars because she's telling the truth about the illegal wars. And we predicted this. That's why it's so insidious and dangerous that people on the left push RussiaGate, because it will be used against anyone who has a counter narrative to our imperialism and our CIA and intelligence community. And that's exactly what's happening. Tulsi Gabbard got on the debate stage. She told the truth about our regime change wars, and the intelligence community immediately slammed her with Hillary Clinton leading the charge. And what do you mean? Well, NBC News is doing the same thing. NBC News uses discredited New Knowledge, who got caught inventing Russia bots. New Knowledge is the company that everybody uses to report on Russia bots. They got caught inventing Russia bots. So that's why it's so important to debunk RussiaGate, and why it's so destructive when people, and ridiculous when people on the left push RussiaGate, because they are sowing their own demise. They are going to be, as the Shakespearean says, hoisted on their own petard. And it's happening right now. So Tulsi, the biggest anti-war voice in the country, immediately slandered as a Russian, and constantly slandered as a Russian. And not just by Hillary, but by the press too, which comes right from the intelligence community. So that's exactly what's happening. And that's the world we're living in now. And that's why it's so important to push back against RussiaGate. It's so destructive when people on the left mindlessly push RussiaGate. They're doing the bidding of the CIA and their enemies. And that's why it's so important to debunk it. And that's why I push back against it. And that's why it's so disgusting when people on the left do it. They're proving they're just as mindless as any moron on Fox News could ever be.
Well, again, Jimmy, I really do appreciate all the work that you've done to really debunk this. You, Aaron Mate, Matt Taibbi, there are voices out there who are pushing out against this. And I think you're finding success in doing so because, there isn't many people doing it. So thank you again.
There's a huge lane open. I appreciate everybody in the press leaving this huge lane open for me. I do a video, me talking to Bill Binney. It'll get 200,000-300,000 views. Me in my garage talking to a 79-year-old guy in his wheelchair, we get 250,000 views talking about the minutia of RussiaGate. And I just want to say thanks to the mainstream media for leaving me a huge lane.
Absolutely, and I echo that sentiment as well. So for folks out there who want to stay up to date with your show and your touring schedule, how can they do that?
JimmyDoreComedy.com. Go to Jimmy Dore, and that's Dore spelled D-O-R-E. And we're on tour. We're doing live shows weekly in Los Angeles at the Sycamore Tavern. We just had Dylan Radigan as our guest on our live show last night. Those shows always sell out, thank God. And then we're on the road. We're going to Buffalo November 5th, November 17th and 18th. We're in Philly. We're going to Honolulu in December 27th. We're going to Portland in January. We'll be in Tempe, Arizona in February. So we're traveling everywhere. Go to JimmyDoreComedy.com for a link and come see a live show.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jimmy. I really do appreciate you being on the 200th episode of the show. It means a lot to me personally, and hopefully we can have you back at some point in the future.
Well, congrats.
Everybody spends most of their life living in a totalitarian system. It's called having a job.
Challenging a foreign policy establishment and the military-industrial complex.
This is what happens when you start to really threaten the system.